Today we're going to be talking about global winds. Make sure you have your note sheet out and you are ready to go. You will also need several colored pencils. So go on and get up and get those so that you are ready. There's several vocabulary words that you really need to understand as we go into global winds. You need to understand the equator, where it is, and why it's so special. So it's part of the Earth's surface that gets the most direct light. It's that imaginary line that splits it in half. Convection, you must know, it's that cycle of hot air rising and cool air sinking. Rotation, it's when the Earth spins on its axis. And it's spinning from west to east, that is counterclockwise. You need to know the difference between rotation, spinning on its axis, and revolution, moving around the sun. You also need to understand the Coriolis effect. The rotation of the Earth makes the wind seem to bend or turn as it moves. All right, make sure you have your map in front of you and you are ready to go. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to circle the word equator. You'll find it's at 0 degrees latitude. So I just want you to take your pencil and circle the word equator. You can also highlight it if you want to. The next thing I want you to do is draw the following lines. 30 degrees north, 30 degrees south, 60 degrees north, and 60 degrees south. You're going to notice there isn't a 30 on here. So you're going to have to go halfway between 20 and 40, both north and south. So I want you to stop this video for a minute, and I want you to get those 4 lines drawn. If you follow directions, your map should look just like the one you see now. If it does not look like the one you see on your screen right now, I want you to stop the video and I want you to make it look like this. This is super important because each one of those lines represents where the winds change. So we need to know where each type of wind changes, and these are the latitudes that are important. The first global wind we're going to talk about are prevailing westerlies. The prevailing westerlies happen between 30 degrees and 60 degrees. So that's between 30 and 60 degrees north and 30 and 60 degrees south. They blow from west to east because remember, they're always named from where they come from. They often carry some moist air, so you can get some rain and some snow with these winds sometimes. They blow from west to east. We just spoke about that. And prevailing means they're strong. This is some of the strongest winds we have. Now, with the color you chose, I want you to draw your prevailing westerlies. So you can see on the map, there are arrows going from the west to the east. They're both in the northern hemisphere and in the southern hemisphere. Then I want you to write prevailing westerlies somewhere in that area between 30 and 60 degrees. Somewhere in that area, I want you to write the word prevailing westerlies. So pause the video and get all of that completed before you move on. The next one we're going to talk about is the polar easterlies. Choose a color. These move from the poles, that would be the North Pole and the South Pole, and they move down to 60 degrees north, and they move up to 60 degrees south. They always blow from east to west, thus the name easterlies. They bring Arctic air and freezing weather. They're coming from the poles where it's freezing cold, so it's naturally assumed they will bring that cold Arctic air with them. The word polar actually means poles. And easterlies, we know, means from the east to the west. So get your pencil out because you're going to mark up your map. So if you look at 60 degrees north, you'll see those polar easterlies on the top of your globe, and you'll see those polar easterlies on the bottom of your globe. You'll see they're moving in the opposite direction of those prevailing westerlies. The prevailing westerlies are the strongest winds. Ooh, you might want to write strongest winds somewhere. Great note taking. And our polar easterlies are bringing that cold, freezing weather. So after you draw your arrows moving from the east to the west, again, somewhere between 60 and 90, I want you to label that polar easterlies. Pause the video so you can get all of that done. So the next winds we're going to talk about are the trade winds. They are not named from where they come from, so we're going to just have to remember about them. They're kind of named for what happened in the area. So choose another color. I'm going to choose green this time. Air cools between 30 and 30, and it flows back toward the equator. We know the equator is really warm, so that air is rising a little bit, not too far, only to 30 degrees, but as it gets further away from the equator, naturally it's going to cool down a little bit. The Coriolis effect then makes that wind turn around or bend. It's going to be blowing from the east to the west. So you can see it's still opposite. The polars was east, the prevailing westerlies was west, and now our trade winds are east again. So we could call them the trade wind easterlies, couldn't we? They're called the trade winds because they blew ships from Europe to the Americas for trading. This was some of the calmest, nicest winds around, and so this is the area that all the ships long ago, when they needed to carry their freight and their people, they kind of got in this trade winds area, and they went around the continents, and they stayed in this area because it was safe and it had the best winds. So here I want you to get your color. I chose green this time, and I want you to draw those trade wind easterlies. They're going to be coming from the east, and remember they're kind of going up and down because they're at that equator, so they're really kind of rising and falling a little bit as they go along. So I want you to pause the video, and I want to make sure you have the trade wind easterlies marked, and then I want you to make sure that you label them. So again, pause your video and get all of that completed. The next one we're going to talk about is the doldrums. You can kind of think that they're really dull and boring. Okay, the doldrums are the areas on Earth with very little to no wind at all. The rising air at the equator causes that area a very weak wind. If you think about it, the equator is getting that even, consistent heat all day and all year because the sun directly hits it. So it doesn't have a lot of uneven heating. Sometimes we say a person is in the doldrums if they just don't feel like doing much. It also comes from sailors whose boats didn't move when they got caught in the doldrums. That means they kind of just drifted along a little bit with the current. They did not like it at all. They wanted to get out of the doldrums and back in to the horse latitudes or the trade winds. They are characterized by low pressure, high humidity, and little wind. Think about it, low pressure. Do we have much wind when there's low pressure? No, because remember, winds move from high pressure to low pressure. So take a minute, get whatever color you chose, and you're going to color that area between 5 degrees north and 5 degrees south. Again, it's a really small band where there's little to no winds. So draw your line just above the word equator, just below the word equator, and then find somewhere to label that. Okay. Pause the video and make sure you've gotten all of that colored. And finally, we're going to talk about the horse latitudes. The horse latitudes are also areas with not very much wind. Okay, they're a little more wind than the doldrums, but they're still not a lot. That sinking air at 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south causes an area of just a little bit of wind. It's kind of a weird, kind of in-between area. Sailors sometimes would get stuck here for so long they would have to eat their horses or they'd have to throw them overboard so they could lighten their boats. The lighter the boat was, the more likely it was to move. This is characterized by high pressure, low humidity, but very little wind. There's a lot of deserts at this latitude. So it's right around 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south. It's kind of that transition from the trade winds to the westerlies. So on this map, it's represented in purple. So you want to just color a purple line right across that 30 degrees latitude north and 30 degrees latitude south. Those are our horse latitudes. Again, very, very small area as it transitions from your trade winds to your westerlies. Pause the video and make sure you have that colored and labeled.